I want to make one announcement. The WPT is doing a gigantic free roll, a $5 million free roll at the Wynn on December 13th during the WPT Championship. All you have to do to get into the entry and the drawing that I have with these free seats is head over to ClubWPTGOLD.com and sign up using the code BART. I'm going to be at this event. It's going to be amazing. Each seat is worth at least $2,500. And they're also giving away a bunch of 10K WPT championship seats as well. This is Josh from Springfield.
Yeah, how's it going, Bart?
Yep, pretty good. All right, so this is MGM Springfield?
Yeah, so this is at MGM Springfield.
Yep.
So we're playing short-handed. It's four-handed 510 with a 25 straddle on.
510 plus 25. So the straddle is...
So we're actually button straddling here instead of under the gun.
So, but that's a pretty nice advantage for the button to have. So under the gun is, it's a button straddle and then it works through the small blind first or what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And how deep are you?
3,700 effective.
Okay. What is this, like late at night and the game's breaking down or something?
Yeah, the game, it's not even that late. It's like close to 10 o'clock. The game has been running since 10 a.m. So this time of night, unless you get an afternoon crew that kind of comes in and keeps it going, it breaks.
Okay.
So again, we got the button straddle, small blind folds, and then the villain here is in the big blind. He opens to 60. I'm under the gun, and I have queen of diamonds, queen of clubs, and three bet to 200.
Okay.
The button straddler folds, and then big blind calls, so we're heads up.
So you're in position, you 3-bet sort of the cutoff-ish under the gun because it's four-handed, big blind to 60 hero 3-bets with queen of spades, queen of clubs?
Queen of diamonds, queen of clubs.
Queen of diamonds, queen of clubs to 200, big blind calls, and you're in position, and you guys are off to a pot of 425. Something like that, 430.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. 425.
Okay.
Well, yeah, 430 because the small line folds. Yeah.
Yep.
So flop comes down, king of hearts, jack of spades, seven of hearts.
King of hearts, jack of spades, seven of hearts. Okay.
Big blind goes ahead. He checks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going back and forth between putting a small c bet here or just checking behind. And not having a queen of heart, we do unblock some flush draws, which he may have. That obviously continue to a bet on the flop here. So I feel like it's a 50-50 check back or bet small in this spot.
So I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like, so when you're talking about four-handed ranges, when I was saying this, I don't know off the top of my head what a four-handed range necessarily might look like in a given situation. Where the effect would come in here, though, would be, I think you get to bet a lot more here for 1/3 sizing than you might think off the top because it's four-handed, he's just always four-betting kings and jacks all the time. You know how, like, I'm talking about pre-flop, right? Like, you know how, like, if you're in a 9-handed game and somebody opens for a raise from UTG and +1 3-bets the UTG or some other type of configuration, maybe like the big blind 3-bets UTG heads up, UTG opens, big blind 3-bets. King is not always a 4-bet. And certainly not Jack in a very tight configuration. But I feel like in a four-handed game, Jack would almost always be 4-bet here. The reason why I'm saying that is because if that is the case, then you're the one that's got kings and jacks. So you're definitely allowed to bet with more of a volume here. And queen, I just don't know what you're necessarily checking behind here all that much. Because with that being said, if that's true, if he's always 4-betting king, and jack, why would you check behind like aces? Why would you check behind ace, king? So I kind of feel like I want to bet most of my range, if not all of my range here. I would think that that's the way that this would sort of boil down if king, and jack are 4-bet always, four-handed.
I totally agree with that. Just a little history on the villain here. He is a recreational player. He does over bluff a ton. His bluffing frequency is just way higher than the average reg here in in general, and specifically tonight playing four-handed.
I understand what you're saying. My only thing about that is that the question then becomes, okay, so maybe you take certain lines that are bluff catching lines with medium strength hands because this guy overstabs. But my only question is, I guess my contention would be, I will usually keep that to like checking back kings or aces on like 9-3-3, as opposed to like a high board where people don't necessarily just start going balls to the wall on high boards when you're the three better. You'll find people bluff, I feel like, a lot more when they think that you have ace king and you've missed on a ragged board, checking back like kings or aces on 5-6-7, and then just letting the guy bluff off instead of betting, as opposed to this board where you might not get those types of bluffs later on. But okay. So you check it back. Big blind checks, hero checks behind.
Yeah, I
Okay.
check back in the spot.
Mhm.
So turns the four clubs, and big blind now bets 125.
125 into 430.
Yeah,
So small.
yeah, small size.
Okay. Did you ever think about raising? I mean, I guess it wouldn't make sense because of the fact that if you want the guy to bluff, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm thinking he does. This guy's been bluffing like crazy all night. He's gotten caught a bunch too. I'm thinking like he could have a ton of hands here. He could have a bunch of hard combos here. I unblock. I don't have the queen of hearts, which is good because I obviously unblock a lot of queen x hard combos. Obviously 9-10. Ace 10. You can have all
Yep.
the straight combos here in this spot.
I'm gonna assume you just called.
Yeah, I do just call, and just kind of back to what you said about most villains in the spot being shorthanded or going to be four betting off kings and jacks. Definitely, I think this player 100% of the time kings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think jacks that often. Just based, I have a decent amount of history with this player. He's not four betting jacks. Like I don't think he's competent enough to take into consideration that how much wider four betting range should be being four-handed.
Okay. No, and that's perfectly viable. I was just sort of talking about how, if that were to be the case, how that would affect a flop C betting range. And I think it would affect it the way that I was talking about. The interesting thing about the turn, I mean, the way that you're setting this up is obviously it's a pretty obvious just call with the way that you're trying to set this one up against this guy.
Just really a bluff catching at this point.
Right. The only thing that I was going to actually say about why I was like, oh, did you ever consider raising turn, which might not make necessarily a whole lot of sense against this particular villain, is because if he were to four bet always with ace king, you've got two queens in your hand. So he doesn't have ace king. You have queen queen, which blocks king queen pretty hard. There's less king jack out there because there's a king and the jack on board. So it's just you're left with king 10. It's just kind of interesting, like this very, very small sizing. It seems to be sometimes like kind of indicative of something that is less than a king. And I do wonder, again, maybe not necessarily with this guy with a bluffing background, if I would ever actually raise and then check back the river against certain opponents if I played it this way, because of all these blocking properties and the draws and stuff like that, and whatever his bet size is indicative of here on the turn. But anyways, 125 call.
So just real quick, earlier on in the session, I have noticed that he likes to like take these small sizings, like these small jabs. Sometimes just donk leads, and then sometimes if like a villain does show, or a hero in particular shows a weakness, and like would check behind in the case in the specific hand, he does take like these small sizings with some draws that I've seen previously in other hands in this specific session. But moving on, so I do call, 125, I call.
Yep.
And then we get an interesting river. It's the queen of clubs.
The queen of clubs. I thought you had queen of diamonds, queen of clubs.
Sorry, it wasn't the queen of clubs. It
wasn't the queen of hearts. Queen of spades. Queen of spades.
Queen of spades. Yeah, let's put it out there. I must have typo on the notes.
So no front door heart draw came in. The hearts did not come in.
Hearts brick out. Yep.
All right. So you make second set here, but I guess completes ace 10 and 9-10. 9-10.
Yeah. Ace 10 and 9-10.
9-10 was double gutted on the flop, but there was no bet. But I mean, the guy bet the turn. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like if you're trying to configure like what's this, open and then calling 3-bet range. I mean, if you don't think he's completely, out to lunch. I mean, there's four combos and I-10 suited and four combos of ace-10 suited that could definitely be played this way. You know, if he's not continuing with the ace-10 offs too, which he may four-handed in this configuration. But so he goes ahead and he bets 350 now.
So big blind bets 350. So again, kind of like I would say the last call that we had here on the live stream, this is, you have to be thinking about whether you're just going to call or raise, I assume, right?
Yeah, so I definitely think I'm raising in this spot. He you know, again, I feel like, you know, he definitely has a lot of king X. I mean, I feel like he's got some king X in his range. I know we blocked king queen, right? And we talked about ace king four betting pre-flop, which definitely, you know, I see as a valuable option here. But you know, I think he is going to be value betting some king X here. You know, I'm also thinking like he could have flopped a set of sevens, possibly. Maybe they sized up, maybe seven sizes up more on the turn, or he, you know, turned a set of fours. Again, do sets take this small sizing though? Something to obviously take into consideration and think about.
So, I mean, the hands, so yes, I mean, definitely the turn sizing is definitely to consider. I think 7-7, if you had 7-7, 4-4, if it's ever taken those lines, king jack for top two. I don't think any of those hands are folding if you, I would say, size, you know, you don't go insanely large. The other thing too is that, I mean, usually you normally never really have to think about this, like in live poker. Like you talk about like, well, what did the, you know, we talk about like, you know, usually people like to be showdown monkeys because they don't want to bet in position and then face a raise. And I always talk about like in live poker, the smaller stakes you go, the more like you don't have to worry about that. Betting's a free roll because the, you know, the frequency of you getting check raised, river bluffed is nil. Here it's like even more extreme. What crossed my mind was that like, are you ever scared that if you raise, you're going to open the betting back up to ever get blown off of your equity? But the frequency of somebody three betting as a bluff to a river raise is just absolutely insane. And if you raise, he can't really even re-raise unless he specifically has ace 10. He can't even put the extra bet in with 9-10. Now, I don't know how often you check back ace 10 on the flop, but I would tend to raise. And the thing that I say about these types of hands is when somebody like sends in a hand like this, and it might be slightly different here, Josh, in this particular situation, is that in general, I like a raise, but I don't like a raise if you're always saying you're going to raise call off. Because if you're always going to raise and then call off to a 3-bet, it changes the math equation quite a bit. And that's what a lot of people have a lot of trouble with. So if somebody was like, hey, like, would I, you know, should I raise here? Well, if you're going to call a 3-bet jam, no, you shouldn't. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're capable of folding to a 3-bet on the river, you have to be some type of player to be able to 3-bet jam bluff.
That's what I'm saying. Right. That's what I'm saying.
You know, you have to be you know, this player, part of me, I mean, if I had to make a like 50-50, like 50% of the time, yeah, I think he might have that in him. 50% of the time, he might just, if he does do that, it's such a nutted spot where, like, again, like I said, nobody really 3-bet jams rivers.
So Richie Vegas in the live chat says, where the hell was the comment? He said, who's calling with worse to a raise? Richie, what about pocket jacks? What about pocket sevens? What about pocket fours? What about king jack? What about queen? What about queen jack? What about king queen? I mean, there's 4 queens in the deck. As long as Josh doesn't like makes it like 800 to 1,000, like all of those hands are calling. Sometimes I wonder the games that some people are playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, look, I'm definitely raising this spot against this particular villain. I just, like you said, I have to be able to find the fold if, you know, because you are obviously reopening the action. I feel like you're going to get called by worse and get value. And then if he does repop and jam, at that point, it's like, well, how,
Well, the pot's not that big. I mean, the pot's not that big, right? Because it was just no betting on the flop, and you just 125 on the turn.
so 430, right? 430 to the flop, another 250 on the turn.
And you guys have like a bunch behind. I mean, you've got 3,500 or maybe 3,400. So
Yeah, 3,300.
yeah, it's not like you're starting the river with like 2,000 and you're like, oh God, if I make it 900 and he jams, it's like a min raise back. You know, it's going to be substantial. It's going to be a substantial 3-bet if that's what happens. I think that I would raise here probably to like 900 to 1,000, something like that.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I go a little big. I go a little bigger. I go 1,100.
So hero raises to 1,100. Okay.
And so now villain like looks at the board, looks back at his chips, and then rips all in.
Well, again, I mean, we've already talked through it. Be about 3-bets,
Yeah.
all in. So it's all in for, I think you guys started the river with.
Yeah, it was 3,300. I think I had 2,200 behind if I recall correctly.
3,300.
It was 2,200 to call. So pots, I've got in my notes 4,300, 2,200 to call. We're getting 2 to 1. You got to be right.
47. Yeah, somewhere around there. You might be getting a little bit more than, yeah, it might be, but it's still a substantial all in. I mean, and the other thing though too is that, again, just a couple of things about this is that I don't even think he shoves with 9-10, number one. So it's just basically it's about as polar as it gets, right? But then it's just like one of these spots though. It's almost like a 4-flush spot sometimes where like anybody can have like the nut suit. So this just doesn't seem like a spot where somebody recreationally takes like an ace and decides to like bluff with it. I mean,
ace X of hearts or something, and they're just like, oh, I block, ace 10.
I mean, listen, I've made some big raise folds here before. Like I said, I think you played the hand fine. I don't know how you're going to end up calling it. I mean, I guess the only thing that I would say is that, and this guy does not sound like the type of guy. I suppose where you could be exploited is if somehow someone knew that you always bet ace 10 on the flop, but I don't know how they know that. Like, how did they know that if you are betting ace 10, you might not. If you have some checks, maybe some of your best ace highs are not bet. I could see. I mean, you'd probably bet off like ace 3 with a backdoor more than like ace 10, right? On king jack 7. So I don't know why you couldn't have ace 10. So
yeah, I mean, I could definitely be checking back some ace 10 here. Yeah, I mean,
I guess he could have 10-10. I mean, I guess a hand that he could have would be 10-10 that he's turning, 10-10 would be one of the ones that blocks. I guess that would be the primary bluff to do it with.
Pocket tens,
yeah.
Or just like he's just going balls to the wall with just like, any hard combo.
So Rodrigo says turn bet doesn't really make sense if villain has ace 10 to me. Why? Because of the small sizing. I mean, I suppose, but I mean, he can still make a smaller sizing on turn and then bet larger on the river and still put Josh kind of in a world of hurt. Did you end up releasing the hand?
So yeah, so again, like I'm doing the math in my head, right? Getting 2 to 1, only got to be right 33% of the time in this spot. Like thinking about, obviously all the history I have with this specific villain and everything. But I just go back to the fact that I feel like players just don't find 3-bet jam bluffs specifically for this amount. And so I do end up folding, and he does show ace 10 off.
So big blind shows.
That's
good. Well, that's a good raise fold. I mean, there's a discussion in the chat about whether or not the guy can jam 9-10. I suppose you could make a case. Here's the thing. I suppose you could make a case if I had 9-10 and I was in Josh's opponent's spot and I didn't have that much respect for my opponent in this exact scenario, I think I might shove 9-10 because I wouldn't expect my opponent to be able to raise fold pocket queens at the end. Or if he was slow playing kings or jacks, right? If anybody heard my podcast from last week, I got absolutely gifted a stack at 5-10 last week with king jack when it was kind of similar. The board came out ace queen X. I had opened for a raise. He made a min 3-bet and I called. we were heads up. The board came out like ace, queen, 4. I checked, he checked. The turn was like a 7 or 6. It was inconsequential. I bet like a quarter the size of the pot. He called. It was like ace, queen, 4, 6. The river was a 10. I bet and he jammed like 5x the size of the pot with pocket aces. He was slow playing, right? So my point here is that if you get a guy that might play kings this way or queens, if I don't respect the guy, I don't think he's capable of raise folding for value. So I might 3-bet 9-10. But if I was up against somebody who I thought might be capable, I might not. So anyways, thanks for the call, Josh. I appreciate it.